Welcome to So What's It Actually About? I'm your host, Margie McKechnie, and I, along with my wide array of guests, hope to help you better understand and weather the wonderful world of actuarial science.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode. We are joined by Kasturi. Kasturi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Margaret. Good to be here.
Thank you, really. I'm so excited for this conversation because it's a different lens to a lot of the conversations that we've had. You are an educator. Speak to your background, your current role, just so that we can position the podcast for our listeners.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. Currently, I am the Dean of the Center for Higher Education Development. The center itself is wholly focused on educational development. That means thinking about teaching and learning, assessment, curriculum, pedagogy, and learning in different ways. And our scholarship is about the research around this. How do students learn? What do they do? What is most suitable, etc., etc. So the educational development sort of field also acknowledges the diversity of students in our classes.
Yes.
So we have to, in a sense, think about language, whether it's the language of the student or the language of the discipline.
Yes.
Because in many senses, both languages need a literacy.
Yes.
Disciplinary jargon and language and words and vocabulary can be very intimidating for students.
Yeah. Especially
if English is not their first language.
Yes.
So here you see an intersection of those two kinds of languages, if you like. A student needs to understand what their strengths are in terms of understanding it.
Yes.
Right? And often there are words that creep up as what we call false friends.
Yes.
So in your everyday use of a word, such as, let's say, power.
Yes.
Right? If one has to ask anyone on the street, what is power? They might associate it with a political party.
Yes.
They might associate it with electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can be the ability of a truck to move up a hill.
Yes.
Right.
In mathematics, it can be an exponent.
So completely hybrid. To the power of. The point of the matter is, in the different disciplinary areas, the student has got to, in a sense, exclude the noise around the term that might interfere with their ability to use it in that particular subject or content area. So it is about understanding how that word, with its many meanings, works in that particular area, in this case, actuarial science, right?
Yes.
And so as you move from first year to second year, third year, you are deepening your understanding of a set of finite terms. They'll be repeated. What you need to understand as a student, as a teacher, what is the complexity around the term? What am I being asked to do further that I didn't know last year?
Yeah.
How do I expand my knowledge? And that's how you build the language of the discipline. Now, the language of the discipline, as we know, is not just in the spoken form. So it's not just your ability to explain how a problem is solved, etc.
Yes.
You have to be able to write it, read it. So there are different ways of knowing. And so my work in educational development with all of my colleagues is about understanding those different ways. So, for example, in the humanities, there are very slim chances that you're going to see flow diagrams or algorithms or anything in the way that essays are constructed.
Yes.
Language is used to do that.
Yes.
But in engineering, in the sciences, etc., you're going to see a different representation.
Yes.
Students need to understand what instruments or artifacts are we using to represent the knowledge.
Yes.
What do each of the components mean? Do I understand how to draw a graph, how to read a graph? So that way of knowing in any discipline has a literacy all of its own.
Yeah.
And often students are expected to know that without being taught that. Right? So we need teachers to be able to break that down in class.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it is during the lecture, right? So you're thinking about that, or a practical or a tutorial. But also very important when students get their assessments back.
Yes.
And they get feedback and they get their marks, etc.
Yes.
that's a wonderful opportunity, a learning opportunity for students to see how examiners or the lecturers or assessors mark a particular instrument, assessment instrument, against a rubric, and to understand what is expected of them in the next time.
Yes.
So there are different ways of decoding, the language, the mystery around that discipline. And the greatest skill that one can develop over the years is to show mastery.
Yes.
So by the time you get to be a master's student in a discipline, you actually are that. You have conquered all the incremental steps in understanding how knowledge works in that field.
Yeah.
So if we have to put this kind of angle on learning and knowledge, you will see that highly technical approaches, even to technical content, is only going to take you thus far.
Sure.
You can learn all the recipes, formulas, etc., but if you don't understand the concept or the principle, you are not that person who can fish for life.
Sure.
So one needs to think about what are the quick wins. Yes, I need to know this. There's a certain amount of knowledge that I have to commit to memory. Right? I've said in the past, if you have a paramedic who's on the road and there's an accident scene, they have to have knowledge at their fingertips. They cannot go to a textbook and say, what do I do now while I'm saving this life? So what is that critical knowledge in actuarial science that every student has to have on their fingertips? Because if they don't, it will sit them back. They won't be able to follow the lecture. They won't be able to ask the right questions in the tutorial, etc. Now, that I think is the student's responsibility.
I agree.
Especially after it has been taught and they understand what the concept is. So that's a precondition. But after that, you can't go to example number 10 and still be working with introductory information that you don't know.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So there's something about incremental learning that is happening. We don't have a program or a degree divided into 3 years for nothing. There's logic. Right. So in the first year of that logic, you've got to have the building concepts down. The foundational concepts have to be mastered. When you go to the second year, you're starting with a greater application. You're understanding how those are operationalized, how they work in the real world. By the time you get to your capstone or your third year, you must be able to command like a set of skills with a big problem that is given to you, solve the problem, explain the problem, and you are almost on the cusp of going into the real world of work, industry or whatever. So one needs to see that learning in those incremental ways. And therefore, at the end of the year, when you pass your degree, it's not just a pass your year, the program for the year. It's not just a matter of getting a certificate and adding to the transcript. I think each student has got to reckon with themselves. I have now passed second year. Have I mastered the second year concept to prepare me for third year? When I get to third year, if I just memorized and wrote learn for my November exam the previous year, am I going to be in a real authentic position to now move into the third year of study?
Where my second year knowledge is assumed.
Correct. So the gaps, whose responsibility is that, right? Now, we can't put it on the student because in this context, we have many variables, if you like.
Agreed.
That are not invested in students alone. It's the quality of the teaching. It's about how examples are contextualized. It's about whether the case studies used are relevant. There are lots of decisions or choices that are made in the teaching and learning that could contribute to whether those gaps have been filled. Students who don't articulate it, are perhaps on the back foot in the sense that it's not that the gaps don't exist. It's just easier, less onerous to just say, yes, I understand, than to actually put up my hand and say, I don't understand that. And, I'll take the shame that comes with it. Okay? Because that's, in the real experience, if you're sitting in a class of 50, 60 students, it does take some.
It does.
Because the minute I open my mouth, I am being judged, right? So I've got to work with that. How are people listening to the question? Is it a stupid question? Because I've been told all my life, don't ask stupid questions.
Yeah.
So there are many things that are happening in the classroom that might prevent a student from addressing the gaps.
Yes.
So, as I say, because our assessments are designed to sort of work on a discrete area, content knowledge, they don't often check for understanding in the broadest, series of things. We might confuse good marks with deep understanding.
Yeah.
And they may not be the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. There's been numerous things that you have. There are numerous things that you said, which I really want to unpack. I think I sort of try to listen carefully, and I'll sort of allude to them now. One of the things you said initially was to do with the different languages the students are engaging with in a classroom. And I think that's a very interesting thing for me, because when I studied my teaching diploma, I read a paper on students that didn't speak English as their first language. And it was saying to them, when they were learning mathematics, they were actually engaging with 3 languages. They were engaging with English, they were engaging with mathematics, and they were engaging with their home language. And so there was a translation that had to happen between those languages. And so in the actuarial profession, we have many students that are coming in that are not English speakers, and yet we teach them in English. And so they're engaging with the technicality of what actuarial science is with English and then with their home language. What would be your advice to a student that is sitting in that situation? And a second question to that, what would be your advice to a lecturer sitting in that situation? Because, as you said, there's different parties and there's different responsibilities, and that responsibility is actually split between those 2 parties. What would be your comment there?
Yeah, so that's an important point and a good question. I think if we're looking at technical language, right, it is unfortunate perhaps that English is the medium of instruction across South Africa. But we have recently put in place, the Department of Higher Education has, and the government has, a language policy that is regionally based. So one says one doesn't need to be proficient, but you do need to have an understanding, or certainly create the conditions for the regional languages to be used in class.
Yeah.
So from a teacher's point of view, I would say you would have to create the conditions for students to code switch or to trans-language. So there must be time built in where they can take a concept, then translate it, understand in a group what it means in different ways of understanding, then bring that back to English, then understand what the losses and gains are in translating both ways. Now, from a student's point of view, to complement that process is the issue of glossaries.
Yes.
So when you come up with a term, or if you have a list of disciplinary terms that are highly technical, and one goes through this process of trying to understand with a dictionary or otherwise, one needs to develop a glossary.
Yes.
That makes sense and can be vetted, if you like, by another student to say, yes, you're on the right lines, or I've checked in with you, etc. There are databases now of glossaries in the national space. I'm not sure that all subjects have been covered, right? But perhaps the more general ones have, and one can go into that and test the dictionary, if you like, where this translation has been approved by a board and it exists, so it can be used. So those are the 2 tangible ways in which we can think about making sure that the multiple languages, are, number one, acknowledged by the teacher, in operation by students, right? Because both of these go to the real work situation where you're working with a diverse group of team members. They all don't speak English, etc. But at least in class, you've had the experience of what it means to explain yourself, in English, where your understanding might be in your mother tongue. So that translation process, if it is trialed in class, helps that student to go into the world of work and say, I have a sensitivity about this.
Yeah.
I have an awareness, and they